The Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation. Gather! Gather in closer! Closer, everyone! The soldier cried out. The people gathered beneath a massive oak tree. It was a bitter cold day in January 1863. A boy named Samuel, age 10, and his sister Violet, age 7, squeezed and prodded their way through the crowd. "Let's keep going to the front," Samuel said, tugging Violet's hand. "No, let's stay here in the middle where it's warm," said Violet, thankful to have so many bodies pressed close around to shield her from freezing in the January wind. "Fine, you stay here, but I'm going up front so I can hear," said Samuel. "You don't even know what he's going to talk about," Violet said, as her brother wormed his way toward the tree. Finally, Violet gave in and followed her brother to the very front. There, a Union soldier wearing a long, heavy blue coat held a scroll, a rolled-up piece of paper, which was sealed with a red wax stamp. "What is it? Some kind of news?" asked a woman in the crowd. "What happened? What's on the piece of paper?" asked another. "Honestly, I do not know," the soldier answered. "My commander handed me this scroll and ordered me to come up to this tree and read it. So that's what I'm doing." The tree where the people were gathering was in a place called Hampton, Virginia. Hampton was different than other places in Virginia, mainly because nearby Fort Monroe was still under Union control. Unlike Fort Sumter and so many other forts controlled by the Confederates, the Union still held Fort Monroe, so the Union soldiers also controlled the nearby port and town. During the war, many escaped slaves had come to Fort Monroe, hoping to be safe from slave catchers. Eventually, a community of free African Americans had sprung up around the town of Hampton, and that is why, on this day in 1863, a large group of free African Americans were gathering under the giant oak tree in Virginia to listen to a Union soldier. Samuel and Violet had been born into slavery, but their parents had managed to escape at the beginning of the war, and they had been living in Hampton ever since. "Quiet!" the soldier called. "Quiet, please." When everyone was settled, the soldier read the first words. "By the President of the United States of America, a proclamation." And a proclamation is an official announcement from President Lincoln. The soldier waited a moment. Everyone knew right away that they were about to hear something very important. It was not every day that the president sent out written proclamations. The soldier continued reading. "Whereas, on the 22nd day of September, in the year of our Lord 1862, a proclamation was issued by the President of the United States containing, among other things, the following, to wit—" "What did he just say?" Violet asked eagerly, tugging on Samuel's sleeve. "I'm not really sure," he replied. "It was just a fancy way of saying the date, I think. Now hush and listen." The soldier read some more. "That on the first day of January all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state shall be thenceforward, and forever free." The crowd erupted in gasps of relief and joy. "Read it again!" someone shouted, interrupting the soldier. "I want to make sure I heard you right." Everyone in the crowd had been a slave at one time, so they were very happy to hear that Lincoln was proclaiming an end to slavery. Samuel and Violet listened to the rest of it, but when it was over, Violet didn't really understand most of what she'd heard. "So does this mean that we don't have to worry about being captured by the slave catchers anymore?" she asked Samuel. "I think so," Samuel answered, rubbing his chin. "I think President Lincoln said all slaves are now free. But I'm not really sure. We'll have to ask Mother what it all means." The document the soldier read was called the Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation is an act of setting something or someone free. It is one of the most famous documents in the history of the United States, but it did not do exactly what you might think, at least not right away. Unfortunately, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation did not automatically free all slaves. In fact, it did not even say that all slaves should be free, only that the slaves in states that were still fighting against the Union should be free. Some states, including Maryland and Delaware, still had slavery, but they had not seceded from the Union. Lincoln allowed people in states that had not seceded to keep their slaves as long as they continued to fight on the side of the Union. Eventually, slavery was abolished, or ended, by law in all these states, but not just because of the Emancipation Proclamation. Slavery was a major reason that the nation was divided in the first place, but the reason Lincoln declared war was that the Confederacy broke national law by seceding from the Union. In other words, in the beginning, the war was not about ending slavery, but about keeping the nation whole. The Emancipation Proclamation changed this. The Emancipation Proclamation changed the focus and purpose of war at a time when things were not going well for the Union. This was before the Battle of Gettysburg, which took place in July 1863. The Union had not won many battles, yet tens of thousands of men were already dead or wounded, and there was no end to the war in sight. Many people, including his closest advisors, told Lincoln to end the war and let the Confederacy have its way. This picture shows Lincoln just having read the Emancipation Proclamation to his cabinet or group of advisors. Some thought it was a good idea and some did not, but Lincoln did what he knew was the right thing to do. The Emancipation Proclamation let everyone know that Lincoln was not only determined to preserve or save the Union, he also wanted to make sure that slavery would never cause another war. This made the abolitionists very happy, and after that they put their full support behind Lincoln and the war. The Emancipation Proclamation also allowed free African Americans and escaped slaves to fight for the Union. The famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass helped recruit African Americans. He encouraged them to join the Union Army as soldiers. Many African Americans did join the Union Army and fought courageously. African American men and women were eager to help the Union Army in other ways too. Men worked as carpenters, cooks, guards, laborers, and boat pilots. African American women were devoted nurses, spies, and scouts. In this way, men and women who had never been enslaved, as well as former enslaved Africans, courageously worked together to save the Union and bring freedom to the slaves in the South. This statue, the Spirit of Freedom, stands today at the African American Civil War Memorial in Washington, D.C., to honor the more than 200,000 African American soldiers who served during the United States Civil War. From that day forward, the great oak tree in Hampton, Virginia, became known as the Emancipation Oak. It was the first place the Emancipation Proclamation was read on Confederate territory. After the Emancipation Proclamation, the Union Army freed slaves each time it won a battle and took control of a town or some farmland in a southern state. Little by little, one plantation at a time, slavery in the United States was finally coming to an end.